after November. And so with that being said, for anybody who's on the call who may not know who I am candidate Kina Collins, born and raised on the west side of Chicago in the Austin community, still live in the South Austin community, and I am running for Congress in the Illinois 7th Congressional District. My background work is in gun violence prevention work. I witnessed a young person gunned down in my community, and I always tell, as a child, and I always tell people that I didn't choose organizing, organizing chose me. And nowadays, I mean, 20 years plus after that incident, we still see how gun violence is being intersected in our daily life here in Illinois 7 and in this conversation around immigration. Um, and so, first, I want to be clear that this is a sensitive topic for me because all the way back when I first ran against Representative Davis, for anybody also who doesn't know, I've ran against Congressman Davis the last couple of primary cycles. But in 2019, our campaign had made a very bold call for the abolition of ICE. And we took the hits for that as a campaign because 6 years ago, that was not a popular call. People thought it was very fringe. But because of the work that I had done in Black Lives Matter, police accountability, because I met great community organizers like Betty Alzamora and other folks across the district who really pushed me on not just saying we need comprehensive immigration reform, but what does that really look like for our community? Because I was tracking the dollars, and that if you truly wanted comprehensive immigration reform, that means that we actually put systems forward that create a clear pathway to citizenship. Um, we call for the abolition of ICE. And in 2024, I was the only candidate in the entire state of Illinois that APAC had spent money against to keep out of the seat. And they called me a defund the police candidate. And they used the clips of me talking about the abolition of ICE all the way back in 2019. I think that that conversation is important now because in this moment, there is no middle of the road. People are dying in the streets. People are being kidnapped. People have been being separated from their families. And there is absolutely no reason, in my opinion, in a district as democratic as ours, that we should have somebody on the fence about this issue. This is the issue that we have to speak about. And so my commitment is that I've stood by that call. We have a very important vote coming up in the Senate where I hope we're going to talk a little bit about that with Betty tonight, where our senators, we need to push on them to not fold. They should not be giving additional funding to DHS, and especially with additional funding to ICE put in those appropriation bills. And then there's the community aspect, right? There's the on the ground work. We can't abdicate our responsibilities as organizers in this community to shield our neighbors. And so that means while legislation is moving slowly on the federal level or being held up, on the ground, there's so many things that we could be doing, from mutual aid to rapid response. And that is really what I wanted to pull community together to talk about tonight. I also just want to hold space that we should not act like this is normal. This is not normal. To see somebody's life snatched from them and an entire clip unloaded into their body. That is not normal. And I think that the goal of this administration, outside of very racist tactics that are being used, is to normalize this level of abuse and dehumanizing culture that is running rampant in a system that has no oversight right now. And quite frankly, if I'm going to be honest and we're going to have a blunt conversation, these policies existed with Democrats in power. So this is not just who's sitting in the seat currently. This is an ongoing fight that we have to that we're going to have to dismantle, and it's an intergenerational fight that's going to happen. My stance is also clear. This is not just about passing the DREAM Act. We need a clear pathway for all 11 million immigrants in our country, whether they are documented, undocumented. We need to expand protections around TPS. There's a lot that we have to do. But in the meantime, um, I want to give the opportunity for Betty to introduce herself to community members, talk a little bit about the work that she's also been doing. Um, and the reason that I brought Betty in particular is because we need experts in this moment. We need directly impacted peoples. We need those voices pushed to the forefront. And the thing that I love about Betty is that we've known each other for years. And as much as she, enjoys talking to me and she loves me as a person and I love her, she has never failed to hold me accountable as well with the platform that I have, especially around the issue of immigrant rights. And that is the sign and the marker of a true organizer, that no matter how much time elapses, when you come back together, you feel like no time has passed and you pick up, right where you left off. And so I'm really grateful to have her as a moral compass in this. And she has made herself available, not just to me. She is the type of organizer that will make herself available to any of the candidates or anybody who wants information on how we could better improve our community. And so just with that, I would like to turn it over to Betty Alzamora to introduce herself.
Thank you, Kina. And good evening, everybody. Thank you for Kina, to you and your team for inviting me into this community space. I'm deeply grateful. As Kina mentioned, my name is Betty Alzamora. In this space tonight, I bring multiple identities. I am a very proud queer Latina immigrant originally from Caracas, Venezuela, first generation American citizen. And I have a funny story to tell about that from something that happened yesterday. And I am a community advocate, a volunteer advocate in the immigration space, wearing multiple hats with Indivisible Chicago, Indivisible West Side, and one of the co-leads and founder of the Paso West Side Rapid Response Team serving the near west suburbs. I think before we get started, what I wanted to first do was to honor and remember Nicole Renee Macklin Good, Alex Preti, Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, because we hold their families and their chosen families very close into our hearts alongside their communities. And alongside the many Black and Brown lives around our region, whose lives have been forever changed by the violence and loss caused by the recent immigration enforcement escalations, both in Minneapolis, Chicagoland, and in many municipalities around the United States. And I also want to lift and honor the lives that were lost in ICE detention in 2025, 32 in total. And I think for me, as I make mention of these multiple identities that I bring into this space, it reminds me, the senseless atrocities of these lost lives violently cut. It reminds me of the interconnected struggles between movements, immigrant justice, queer liberation, and our desire collectively to want to end systemic violence once and for all. So in this moment, I think we all stand in grief and in solidarity, full of rage and committed to collective care, dignity, and justice for everyone. And I think it's also important to name a few things. The moment calls for an honest naming of what's happening. The the breakdown, the complete breakdown of accountability by our civic and public institutions at governmental, federal level, and beyond. The fact that we are being gaslit, the widespread cognitive dissonance that many of us feel, the increase in state-sponsored violence that while we have seen it in recent months, weeks, and days in communities across Chicagoland and Minneapolis, um, this is something for some of us that we feel very deeply in our bones because for the last 27 years, my people in Venezuela have lived a similar reality. And many communities and um, around the world have felt the same, the force of authoritarianism. I also think it's important to acknowledge and to name and lift the fact that for many people, white communities in particular, they see themselves reflected in this moment in ways that they'd never necessarily had seen themselves before. And this is bringing them into the space of activism, which means that it's creating a moment that we can all start to tell the story from the perspective that we sit. But more importantly, it also allows us to refuse harmful narratives that are dominating mainstream media and social media outlets. And to, acknowledge that authoritarian systems do not retreat when they are challenged, because all they're going to do is escalate the violence and try to hold on to power. And I think we're seeing that so very, very clearly right now. The wave of radical violence that we have seen is because they're running scared, they're running frightened, because they're losing in the court of public opinion, and they will hold on. This is a classic authoritarian situation that we're seeing. And we're also watching as they, in real time, start eating their young. So whether it's a Greg Bovino being sidelined or, the scathing remarks against a Kristi Noem, and now even Stephen Miller is showing up as a target. All well and good. This should be happening. And then the interesting thing that I'm also observing is something that Kina raised is, we're seeing more and more political electeds raise their voices calling for the abolishment of ICE. This was something that, I'll use an example. I was at the rally and march, helping as one of the marshals this past Sunday down in downtown Chicago. And I was standing on the sidelines helping at the stage where I witnessed politician after politician come up and say, abolish ICE. A year ago, 2 years ago, that would have been, something that, like to Kina's point, it was um, political suicide. At the same time, I was also standing by longtime community advocates, fierce immigrant rights advocates who have been saying this since 2002. I want to be clear. Abolish ICE is, in my view, it's an important thing to, and I'm glad that we're moving that Overton window where people are now starting to become a lot more comfortable with the idea and learning more about what abolishing ICE means. Now do this. Now talk about abolishing DHS. Full stop. We're going back to 2002 now, when the Patriot Act was enacted and this behemoth of an organization that was there set up for what is now state-sponsored violence, dehumanization. I mean, you got to get rid of all of that too. And so I applaud all of these politicians. It was like a goosebump moment to be standing there next to these people who had dedicated decades of their lives fighting for people to actually be able to embrace the concept of abolish ICE. Think back to the George Floyd assassination and the subsequent riots and everything that happened. When anybody used to fund ICE, that too was seen as political, you just don't go there kind of thing. So I think that's something that it just is so super important for us to acknowledge that we are getting to a point where all communities are starting to embrace this movement. And I'm not talking about immigration reform, by the way. This is about total abolishment. This is about taking, it's not about restructuring what we have. It's about looking and seeing what is in the best interest of the human capital that we all are. What can we do to keep us all safe? So, as a community responder, one of the things that I would love to be able to get into conversation with all of you right now is really around the concept of direct nonviolent action. Because this is the moment that we're living in, as far as I'm concerned, Kina. What I'm seeing is more and more community is coming out. They're asking, what can I do? How do I get engaged? How do I start? Where do I start? And that is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to educate, it's an opportunity to engage, but mostly it's an opportunity to continue to build community, to be able to bring people into the fold on behalf of the collective. And it's such a surreal moment of opportunity. There's just not enough hours in the day to do all of the things that we can do. So yeah, direct nonviolent action. So much of what we learned from Dr. King when he wrote a letter while incarcerated in Birmingham. So many of those principles that have now been built on by so many community organizers. We stand on the shoulders of giants. These are the things that really give me life. How do we inspire other people through our own actions? Because courage is contagious. Courage is what gets people out. But we have to do this not in chaos, but in organized, prepared, disciplined ways. So, Kina,
Yes.
just a few immediate thoughts for you.
Um,
But I do believe we all have a role to play.
as
All
y'all,
sorts of rules. It doesn't have to, it's not one size fits all.
Mhm.
There's a lot that we can all do together.
As you all can see, why I brought Betty on, I think that's a very important point. And thank you for the hearts and the appreciation for Betty coming because there was a lot to unpack there. But like to, I would like to, so we could spend a little bit of time. I'm going to ask Betty some questions and then I want to open it up to have a conversation with the folks who have joined on the call. And you can either drop your comments and questions in the chat or you can raise your hand and we'd be happy to answer that. Betty, you touched on something that I think is really important and that is critical in the Illinois 7, which is the intersectional fight. We have had some tension in these last couple of years as we've seen this administration try to pit communities against one another. And Illinois 7 is a very interesting district because it's a plurality African American district, but it's flanked by the western suburbs, downtown, communities that have heavy immigrant populations like Ukrainian Village and Pilsen, right? And we see the difference of how Ukrainian Village was treated and their immigrant story getting integrated into the district as different than those who may be living in Pilsen or in the provisos. And so in this moment, as we talk about the intersection, how do we bridge those gaps for communities and really get them to see that we're actually stronger together, right? In this moment. That has been questions that I have heard come up in Austin, this question about resources, which is why, when I first met you and other activists in the district who challenged us on these immigration policies, when we look at the numbers, okay, say you didn't care about the moral issue. We're at $75 billion. This is a very well-funded militia, ICE is. And they're not being held accountable for their actions. I think in the next 4 years, they're slated to get another $18.7 billion dollars on top of, any money that could come through appropriation bills. And so for me, when I go into African American communities, Black communities, and people are saying we're not getting the resources, why are immigrants getting more resources than us? It's not that the money is not there. It's not that the resources are not there. the money is going towards policing our communities instead of the investment and things like healthcare, education, childcare. And so morally, it is my stance to abolish DHS and ICE and dismantle those systems, but there's a deeper conversation there. I would love to hear just a few of your thoughts on that.
I mean, we can spend hours on this, right? Because I think this is
Right.
at the heart of everything in this particular district. But it's, it's not unique to just us. Um, I wish I had like the silver bullet and the one answer. The most important thing for me is being able to gather more communities and bringing them together. So more Black and more Brown communities coming together to be able to have these honest conversations where we're able to say, look, that we are fighting a collective injustice together. Kina, I mean, I'm going to sidetrack a bit. I live in Forest Park. I'm 10 minutes away from Maywood. And when I get really discouraged, I walk over to the Maywood Public Park because there's a statue there of Fred Hampton Sr. He was 21 years old when he was assassinated. And the work that he did at such a young age was just so fundamental. The work that he did in being able to establish mutual aid and being able to build bridges of trust with Brown communities. And it really just reminds me, like that is where the work, that is where the intersection happens, is how do we bring people together to be able to have those conversations, that mutuality of collective objectives. Because I think we spend a lot of time in communities thinking about they have, we don't, when in fact it's just being able to bring those communities together to be able to do that work in a collective. And I think that's the important thing that I spent a lot of time thinking about because of the intersections here in the near west suburbs. Like, how do you earn people's trust? So what I would say for me, I can only speak for myself, is that many times that is translated into being able to show up for people. Just showing up for organizations, grassroots organizers, and being there in solidarity is like for me as an organizer, the first thing I would do. Letting the community members be the one that lead and being able to know when to step back and listen and listen and learn more than anything else. Those are the lessons that I take away every time I go and just like I said, when I get discouraged, go and see Fred. What would he have done had had he lived? Because in 21 short years, he was able to accomplish so much in bringing people together. And then all of that got fractured in the
Mm.
Chicagoland area. So, things to keep in mind. How do we, find people that are able to represent multiple communities at once? And the only way that you can do that is by building those relationships of trust, by showing up to their events, by getting engaged in the work of their communities, by learning. I learned so much from some other electeds while I watch them do this. Some of the Northwest Side elected officials are just like incredibly humble in being able to walk into spaces just to learn and then to do on their behalf. I think that's the important thing as well. And I think we can all do the same in our communities. I don't know if that helps kind of frame some of the answer. I just feel like, wow, we could spend hours kind of brainstorming like strategies and tactics to bring people together. But I think that's what it's going to take.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that I love the framing of grassroots instead of grass top, building leaders in the community and bringing that collaboration together.
It's the
So,
collaboration, right? Like you don't want to
mhm,
walk into a place, learn from somebody, and then try to develop it and spin it off on your own and pass it off. Like
right.
co-opting other people's ideas as opposed to, that can be at a both end, right? Like we can build together. And I think that sometimes gets lost in the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, So I'm gonna move to one action question, and then I do want to move to the group so that we can ask questions in the group. Um, we know this big vote is coming up in the Senate on Thursday, I think. Yeah,
Yeah,
on the 30th.
tomorrow.
We
Or
have
yeah,
we have seen Democrats cave recently with healthcare, right? That was devastating to me as a healthcare advocate. Some of my early work was organizing doctors and medical students around advocating for single payer. And then to see people's premiums skyrocket. And I thought to myself, how could they cave in a moment so critical like this? And then here we are, not unfamiliar. Actually, let me take a step back. I was organizing around the time of Ferguson. I was the young person during the direct actions of Laquan McDonald. And the police brutality and the state sanctioned violence was brutal. This is worse, in my opinion, because we were operating under an administration where there was at least you could push back on the DOJ and there was some civil rights protect. It took some elbow grease to get it, but there were not just straight up calls to shoot and kill people on the ground. And people who did espouse those things, there was an organizing effort that was put into place and a system that was put into place to hold people to account. And so some people might push back on me and they say, well, no, because look what happened to Laquan. Yeah, but remember, Rahm Emanuel and the police chief and Anita Alvarez, they were all saying, no, we're not going to step back. We're not going to. And then we organized. And then they did. They had to acquiesce to the community. This is a situation of, as Betty had pointed out, they're just blatantly lying in the press conferences. They are getting on TV and they are making and drafting their own narrative around what is happening. Don't believe your lying eyes. This person is a domestic terrorist. This person tried to run a law enforcement officer over with their car. They're rewriting the story and the history in real time, and it's coming from the top, right? So, this, in my opinion, is lethally dangerous. And so, with that, I go back to my original question of we've seen the Democrats cave before in very critical situations. How should we prepare or push back right now
I
around this vote getting ready to happen? We've seen Dick Durbin be the one
yeah,
to
Senator Durbin has been known to buckle.
right.
And I think this is why it's been so critical in this moment. The mass campaign that has happened of people making calls on a daily basis, writing emails, sending texts, doing whatever it takes right now to make sure. And the message to Senator Durbin has been don't cave. Like it's not a cookie cutter, like, please vote no. It's like you need to actually be able to, tell them that this is not a time to fold. Yeah, maybe his voicemail is full, but there's 5 different offices that I can give you the telephone numbers to. So basically, this is the joy of organizing. The Chicago box or the DC voicemail box is full. Find the one in Carbondale. Find the one in Springfield. It's just, like it's hard, but we remain persistent in that. So that like that is the most immediate thing that we are driving people, and I can provide you links, the call script and the links to send emails, and just do it every single day. But more importantly, get to your friends, to your community, get to as many people as you can and say, now you do this. It'll take you 30 seconds to hit send or to make that call. This has got to keep growing, like the fact that this has become such a national campaign. And from the last, as I know, unless the 2 senators from Nevada buckle, I think the votes are not going to come in favor of the appropriation bill. But we
Right.
can't count on that because you will get somebody who will cave. I mean, just the fact that 7 House Democrats
Mm.
vulnerable Democrats in an election year chose to let this go forth, tells you all you need to know about, some of our electeds and where their interests lie.
Yep.
Because some of them had actually committed to voting no, and then next thing you know, you have seven Democrats. Anyway, so I would say, yeah, keep holding the line, making the calls, advocating to the extent that it is possible, to get other people to do the same thing. That at this moment, given the criticality of where we are and when the vote will be, that's the most important thing that we can do.
Absolutely. And we could follow up with Betty and send that out as an email to you all, just the links to what you need in the script, because she's right, there's a whole national movement happening around it. And what I will push back and say too is like, call the Republicans. You know, people thought that, I mean, they're doing their best to continue to gut the ACA, which like it has its flaws and we need to do more around healthcare. But I remember people going to the Capitol and going to US senators and sitting in front of their offices in their wheelchairs and telling them, and it was Republicans and Democrats. And I think that one of the things that the Republicans do is create a echo chamber. They create a narrative. And unfortunately, we have spineless elected officials in this party who go along with those talking points. As people, we are seeing it actively. People dying in the streets. And so don't leave those Republican senators off of your call list. Make it an overwhelming call to action. Um, so I do want to take this opportunity to see if anybody has any questions in the group or any comments about any things. If not, we can continue our conversation. There's so much that we can cover and talk about tonight. Anybody? Because I have a follow-up question for Betty.
Keep going, Kina.
Okay, good.
And
So,
Terry, you had one? Did you have
oh,
one?
sorry, go ahead. Terry, you're on mute. Sorry.
I just wanted to say, if you have friends or family in states with Republicans, hearing from their own constituents is the most important. Some surprising people are wavering a bit, like Bill Cassidy in Louisiana. So get them to call, even if they're a hardcore no to any of what we want. If they hear from enough people, they're going to question their own motives,
I
perhaps.
think that is so true, Terry. I mean, I can speak to my own family or part of my family who is actually on the other side of the I can't believe that my brother and I are from the same mother, but here we are. We're still speaking to each other, so I guess that's something. But they're in Pennsylvania, and I've made it a mission that because they live in a very conservative part of the state, and so, we have that conversation frequently. And, given that now it's become a little bit more personal because we have directly impacted family members, it's like, oh yeah, here's the reason why, we continue to educate. It is the work of patience. I'm sure there's many people here that have, families, the crazy drunk uncle that shows up at Thanksgiving and all of that fun stuff. But I agree with you, Terry. Being able to have us, and that's why I keep saying, just spread the word to the extent that it is possible.
And at this point, everyone should be caring about what is being done because, and the reason why I say that is because as a gun violence prevention advocate, I am absolutely stunned that the All Lives Matter crowd is very quiet right now. They're very quiet. When this gentleman that just got gunned down, Alex Preddy, was a legal, law abiding concealed to carry holder in the state of Minnesota. The entire argument around the Second Amendment for a lot of these gun rights groups for decades has been They're trying to take our guns. And what if this tyrannical government takes over and we can't defend ourselves? And now the goalpost has moved. It has moved to he shouldn't have showed up to a protest or in front of law enforcement with the gun as a legal gun owner. And so this is for y'all's family members who live in red states and they care about these issues. This is spilling over. What this current administration is showing us is that it does not matter who it is. They are making it very well known to white women, white men, people who live in seemingly safe neighborhoods, people who live in diverse neighborhoods, people who live in any neighborhood, that they will attack you if you are not on their side of this, or you interfere in any way to protect other civilians against the abuse that they're bringing into the community. And I think that that is an important point to highlight and lift up, because what they've showed in these last two deaths in particular, your whiteness is not going to protect you against this administration. He believes he is a dictator and a king in America, and he believes he makes the rules, and to hell with the Constitution or anything else. And so this is not a Democrat issue. And if anybody is still thinking that, you are far behind, my friend. And you are in for a rude awakening, as this is just year one right now. So I think using those talking points with some of your family members should help move them. And if it doesn't, I think this is where we talk about organizing community. So segueing into that, I would like you to talk a little bit about, because you talked about other forms of resistance and protests that exist. I would love for you to talk about the rapid response work that you've been doing. And I think that this is so important, that congressional districts that are being targeted by ICE need to come up with a format for rapid response. And it needs to be supported by the congressional office. It needs to be supported by your state rep, your state senator, your local, your library trustee board members, because all the resources that we could give to that rapid response, it is an investment in prevention of a lot of the violence that's being inflicted on these communities. And so I would love for you to talk about that, Betty.
For sure. I'm delighted to do so, because it definitely has been my life's mission, it feels, for the last year. I'll start off by saying, this is a great example of what practical, nonviolent, direct action looks like. I will share with you, Kina, so you can share with others, a gift link. If folks haven't seen an article that came out in the last couple of days in The Atlantic about what it's looked and felt like in Minneapolis, it's an incredible eyewitness account of how people have been preparing and what it looks and feels like from their perspective as rapid responders. Here's what I would say about that. It's first and foremost, who keeps us safe? We keep us safe. This is a community thing. And it's not to say that we can't work with civic institutions, with electeds and the like. It just means that community will always stand up for community. And what rapid response attempts to do is provide a framework that allows people to be able to exercise their constitutional rights by knowing what those rights are. So this is what the whole Know Your Rights movement is, and why it matters so deeply that everybody does these trainings or gets the information from multiple sources. And I can help you, I can point you in some of those directions. And then number two, learn how to the extent that it is possible, become an effective documentarian. So it is the filming, the proper way of being able to record all of these things, because the way I have now trained over 3,500 people since last year in rapid response and Know Your Rights. And that what I always say to people when I go through the training is that why it matters so much how we hold our phone, what it is that we're narrating, how we're recording, is because all of this documentation, working through resources like rapid response, will come into a place where it can support the lawyers that are doing the class action suits or the legal defenses for the directly impacted people. But more to the point, I believe that there will be a day of reckoning. There will be a day of reckoning. We will have our Nuremberg moment, and people will be held accountable for what they did. So if we learn how in community to properly document and to safely do so, the storing of that documentation so that we can make sure that we get it into the hands of the lawyers, it matters deeply. Let me give you an example. Castañón Navas was a settlement that was reached in May of last year, and then it was extended. And that was the one that basically for the illegal traffic stops that were happening, it provided relief for hundreds of people that were detained and were about to be deported. Out of the 25 cases that were presented, I believe, 22 of those used supporting evidence that was compiled by the rapid response teams, by the network that is affiliated with the Illinois Coalition of Immigrant Refugee Rights and with the Organized Communities Against Deportation. Our group in the near west suburbs, Paso West Side, is one of the 36 rapid response teams that are affiliated with the network. And so there's a lot of this is what I mean about who takes care of us, who keeps us safe, we keep us safe. This was not like some institution going out and document. This was people like you and me, just normal residents, ordinary people doing extraordinary things in documenting. That is super important. And super important because what we train people to do is, as they're documenting, to narrate what they're seeing, and also, to the extent that it is possible, to the directly impacted person, be able to help them with the supportive engagement role, team members, be able to remind them what their rights are. And we go through that kind of training pretty extensively. Training, the workshops run for about 2 hours. I'm actually getting ready to host a few starting in February that I'll be doing in Forest Park and hopefully in Maywood as well. But you can also get training. There's a weekly virtual training that is available through ICER. And again, I'll provide you, Kina, the links. I've got a slide that people can also take a QR code of as well. These are the two big things, like get yourselves engaged in the work. Even if you're not affiliated with a rapid response team, learn what the work is. That's like two of the big things. The third big thing that we are rolling out more and more is the ability for even more hyper-local organization. So you're probably going to be hearing a lot more about block captains. In the Southwest side, we have learned so much about how they organize. And that means like being able to actually have your neighbors, the house next door, over here, over there, being able to bring them together and tell them, this is what you need to do in the event of ICE. You record, but hey, you can also whistle. The whistle tactics have proven invaluable in Chicagoland. They have proven super, super invaluable in Minneapolis because they serve as an advance warning. If done in ways that make sense, you can actually transmit. Think about it as a telephone game, right? Like you hear the whistle, a community then transmits, and then people start hearing the whistle, and the people that are most at risk can actually go into safe places. So that by the time the goons come rolling down the street, there's nowhere, no one's going to open doors and nobody's going to go out because they know they've had advance warning. It sounds like, Betty, that's so surreal. But you know what, friends? I've seen it in action. I've seen it in action in Belmont Cragen. I saw it in Albany Park, and I saw it in Melrose Park. multiple times where community members, and it's kind of fun because they don't just use whistles. The first Trump regime taught these communities to use their air horns and their car horns. And sometimes the most directly impacted people stay at home and they'll activate their car alarms from inside. And so it's like a big, it gets really loud, but it's important because it serves as advance warning and allows people to go inside. Those are just a few examples of some of the things that we do as rapid responders. It's organized, it's disciplined, there's a clear objective, which is to keep people safe. There's outcome, but more importantly, it gums up the works, right? So the fact is that ICE is not, or Customs and Border Patrol, they're not going to just walk into communities and take people without at least somebody being out there documenting, because there will be a day of reckoning.
Mm.
Now, we don't tell people to interfere. This is not about getting out there and trying to stop it, because chances are, I mean, like, I think, this is the sad reality, and we learned that in Minneapolis. We brought whistles, they brought guns. You've heard that quote. And so we know that this work, you can't guarantee safety.
Mm.
But at the very least, when we go through the training, we're able to go through and explain to you the levels of risk, because each of us, Kina, has to do their own personal risk assessment. I'll give you an example. I'm a naturalized citizen from Venezuela with a history of activism in Venezuela and probably a file here. I have made the personal choice to not leave the country because I don't think it's safe for me to do so. That's just me. Because I've done an evaluation of risk. I've set up my family preparedness plan. So if anything happens to me and I'm able to get the message, my communications tree will be able to start doing the things I want them to do in the event that I might get detained. But it's because I've done my own risk assessment to think through about what could happen in the event of. And so we talk about those things, and they're very, very heavy subjects. I'm not going to lie, friends, but none of this, you know, it's not easy. But when you do it in community, I don't know. I feel so strongly about it. I think when we do things in community, courage is contagious.
Thank you. Thank you. Janelle actually had a question, and this is when I started, I said that Broadview and Illinois 7 has become ground zero, and it started, a lot with this news cycle and this last year with what has been happening at the Broadview ICE facility, which a lot of neighbors did not even know that was an ICE processing center. My grandfather used to live in Broadview. And how I've always known Broadview is a small, little, predominantly Black suburb where people go and it's quiet. And now people have, one day they woke up and people were being maced in their lawns, right? So that is a very traumatic experience, and we want to hold space. Janelle, I don't know if you're still on or if you want to come off and ask your question, or we could just, whatever you read. I don't know if Janelle is still in here.
I'm here.
Okay, there you go. You're on mute, but if you wanted to, I wanted to give the floor to you for anything that you might want to ask or comment.
Yeah, similar to what you said. I only knew about it a little bit before because I read like immigration news from Borderless Mag, and they had like an article that said like what happens to you when ICE detains you, or like ICE in Chicago. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know that. And then once Operation Midway Blitz ramped up, that's when like more neighbors were like, oh, this is here. And we never knew that it was there. I feel like it wasn't until I like started attending some of the town hall meetings that I was able to understand kind of like, oh, this is a huge kind of scale. And then like the world kind of came to this sleeping community. And then now it's like I was able to kind of like talk to some of my neighbors, like doing own personal door knocking just to be like, hey, like, how are we feeling? Like, does this add like value to our community? And many of the neighbors said no, they don't like it at all, whether it's like, you know, traffic blocked off on 25th and they have to be like redirected, or just like personally, it's like moral wise, it's not right. Um, I feel like the protesting zone in the way in which it was set up is kind of, bizarre. And then like Christy Gnomes actually mentioned like, oh, to protesters, and I guess in like Minneapolis, like set up a protest zone. So like having Christy Gnomes like see the benefit in that, like it's just like I understand like people in the fact that folks have been like beaten post protest hours if they stay later. Um, so I'm like, just like even like the legality of that is uh yeah, it's bad. So I just feel like for me at this point, it's like there's no value to this being open in our community, but no value being open. Like I'm along with abolish ICE. So I'm, and the fact
Yeah.
that like Broadview is also like a growing
Right,
Latino population, which I don't think is really being mentioned. Uh,
right,
so like even from like 2020, and they say, oh, like the Latino population is like around like 11%, like the on the census, or 17 or 15, something around there. The
Well,
real
that's kind of big.
the reality now is 20 plus. Like
mm,
most of my new neighbors who have moved in have been like Latino. So it and the other thing that I think about is because of where we are, like I do think that we kind of have been buffered in a weird way, where I feel like a lot of the actions and the targeting have happened in like communities around us, like Berwyn,
right.
Cicero, Melrose Park, but like Broadview, as far as like ICE presence physically in on our blocks, is like it's non-existent. And I think that they kind of like, okay, we're gonna leave them alone, but like I don't like the fallout that's happening around me.
Yeah.
That's my comment.
Well, I
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Janelle. And here's what I'll say, because I do think once again, this is also a congressional town hall, and there needs to be some commitments. Number one, the evasive nature of our elected officials to not allow community to come in and have clarity and transparency. We don't just need town halls. People want accountability. Betty mentioned that earlier. They want a clear plan about what's happening. And even to your own admission as a resident there, it's been very unclear about how things were happening, where was the protest zone, how it's being utilized, how it's being communicated. And so I just want to apologize to you because I live in South Austin and that happens to us all the time. And in a more, obviously, a minor scale of like someone will develop something in Austin. There was no community benefits agreement. There was no conversation. It was just a raise in the property tax. It was basically this is going to happen. People telling us what was going to go down. And I think that we need to create forums and spaces where it's not just town halls and information, but it's ability for residents like yourself to come forward, give your testimony, and to be able to hold elected officials accountable because that's what we hire them to do. Secondly, there is, obviously from a legal standpoint and a judicial standpoint, things are being obviously moved forward that the conditions be improved, but that's a slow one. This is not just about conditions being approved for people who are being detained there. We need this. I agree with you. We need to shut the center down. Number one, given the reports that have come out of the facility. And then on the community level, once again, going back to the community level and the legislative one, we need the federal government to actually push forth the ending of private detention centers and a lot of these detention centers that pop up where the community did not have any voice in it to begin with. And so, that's my commitment to you. And I know it's been incredibly frustrating. I have friends who live in Broadview, and you are 100% correct. People are not talking about the growing population of Latinos that are, moving into Broadview, but the immigrant population expands beyond the Latino community, right? And I think that those are folks that are slipping through the cracks. But when we talk about Broadview in particular, its infrastructure was just not set up to deal with what happened in such a short period of time. And I wish that elected officials would be more transparent and give more communication. So I appreciate you lifting that up, because I don't
Yeah.
think enough people.
Well, and I think many people don't really. So we do not have private detention in the state of Illinois.
Right, in Illinois.
Yeah. So Illinois in many ways is the most welcoming state in the nation because immigrant rights advocates have worked fiercely over the years to put in those preventions. The fact of the matter, though, is that the processing center has been acting as a de facto detention because of the fact that they were so overwhelmed with volume that they were exceeding the 12-hour limit. And so people were being held there for more hours than that's no excuse, right? For the gross violations of just, like the dehumanization, the way that people were being treated there. And so what's happening is that obviously the facilities are being built in places where private detention is possible. So Indiana, 3 new facilities that are being built, Michigan, Kentucky. And so, what you'll see often is that the folks that are processed in Broadview are then immediately transported to other places, for their next stops in dehumanization, as far as I'm concerned. Broadview is super complicated because it's not something that the local municipality has any course to do. They can put in ordinances to potentially limit the ability to purchase additional space that can be then used by federal entities to develop more processing capability. But this is a federal issue. And it's been good to see, again, we're going back to the whole more and more electeds coming out with, the message of abolish ICE. That's all fair and good, but what are you going to do for Broadview? What's your message to be able to shut down that facility? And I don't know, I don't know that there's any organizer that has a very easy answer around that. There is no easy answer to just being able to shut it down. It's not going to happen in the foreseeable future. But it doesn't mean that we can't advocate for that at federal and municipal level as well. As to the protest zones, I that does not engender any safety. Moreover, what's been of concern is that local, police municipalities that have been providing the support alongside the state police have just made a situation worse because they're doing, what effectively is crowd control work and freeing up ICE and CBP resource to go off and do, let's be clear that these federal entities have created hunting grounds in our neighborhoods. And when, you bring in, police and cops to be able to facilitate that in the name of so-called crowd control, crowd management, I'm telling you as an immigration advocate, la policía, la migra es la misma porquería. It's the same thing. The police, the cops, ICE, CBP, it's the same damn thing. So it's difficult to actually understand, wrap your head around what is going on there with local police, and creating these so-called free speech zones, which, as far as I don't need a zone to actually say that I've got protected speech. The Constitution affords me that.
Thank you so much. We are a little bit over time, if y'all would just allow me to wrap, but I just want to express great gratitude to my friend Betty Alzamora. I knew, me and my team were thinking, they were telling me, let's bring this person in. I said, I know exactly who to bring in because I want to talk to the people and surround myself around the people who've been doing the work before this was a thing. Even the context of, you bringing up the call for the abolition of ICE goes all the way back to 2002. This moment requires that we have political intuition and courage to get it done. And for some of us, like Betty, who have been doing this for decades, we knew this was going to happen. We hate that we were right, that it's turning into what it is. But this is the time where we get smart, we get strategic, and we stay safe as much as we can because there is absolutely no credibility in this administration. And I want to reiterate what I said at the top of this call. There has been piss poor immigration policy put forth with Democrats in positions of power. They have not done things to protect the community. So this is not just a one-sided thing. This is a place where when we say, how do we bring community forward? How do we learn from those who are wiser than us, who have done this for a while? And for me, as somebody who's running in a very contentious primary, I want to surround myself around smart people who can advise us and advise the community how to stay safe. And so I have a debt of gratitude to Betty. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome, Kina.
And
I'll hang out if you want to chat. I mean,
yes, if you want to chat, if you want to connect. Betty,
yeah.
actually, can you put any contact information that you feel comfortable sharing with the group? And she'll put it in the chat for anybody who wants to connect with Betty. Betty is doing amazing rapid response work in the community, building, these micro bases of organizers across different sections of our district and other districts to do this work. And I saw, Mara, a comment you made earlier. Because you were trained, you feel like you saved someone's life because you felt trained
It
in doing
is.
it.
Thank you for saying that, Mara. And I second that. I think there have been moments where I really feel like our presence has actually made a positive impact. I think we have saved lives. And it sometimes feels like you want to really, you want to pop off and really just like swing at someone. But believe me, doing this in community, nonviolent direct action works.
Yes.
Anyway, I do want to thank you all for making the time in the space. I'm just, ordinary people doing extraordinary thing. That's not me. That's you. You're the ones that are showing up on a Wednesday night. So I appreciate y'all.
Thank you. Thank you. And anybody who wants to talk or plug into the campaign about our census, you can go on our issue pages. I mean, some of y'all have been following us for years. Other people are newer to it, but this is just an expansion. I think that the person who gets this seat needs to be unapologetic about this, and they need to partner with the right people in our community, because this is not just going to go away after November or March when we get a new person. And so with that, I'm going to close. I thank you all so much for coming and spending your Wednesday evening with me. I always say you could be anywhere in the world, but y'all decided to be with us. So thank you very much, and y'all have a great night.
I'll hang out for a moment, Kina.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Janelle.
Thank y'all.
Hi, Betty.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Darren.
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
Trainings that you're doing, and I didn't know you were working with Indivisible. That's great. Seems like you have a local thing going on, which is great. Big supporter of them. I wanted to ask, are you, in addition to training them what to do there, how to upload to social media in a way where it gets out there? Because the truth about Alex Peretti and the truth about what happened with Renee Nicole Good, that was really saved when a lot of people put that up on social media, spread it, shared it, threw it across different social medias and accounts.